Welcome, everybody. Welcome, welcome. We're so glad that folks are joining us today. We're here in Winnipeg, Manitoba, where the weather is quite nice and the sun is shining. So that's giving us energy today. Welcome. My name is Jocelyn Lalonde. I will be one of the folks facilitating our time together. I'm from a small town here in Manitoba. I'm a mom, I'm a sister, I'm a friend, I'm a partner. And when I'm not doing this kind of thing, I teach for a university in the area of mental health. Welcome to our Giwiidabindimin program. We're going to talk to you a little bit about what the 5-day certificate program is about and give you little nuggets to hopefully take away at the end of our time together.
Hi there, everybody. My name is JC Chartrand. My family's from Dog Creek First Nation on Lake Manitoba First Nation. I am a registered professional counselor and a certified Indigenous addiction specialist is what I do to fill my day most days. I really enjoy working with the community. I really enjoy working with our youth. And I really enjoy having conversations like we're going to have today and talking about how are we going to walk in a good way in that space of challenging some norms, creating some new creative ideas, and coming up with ways we can collaborate together to really engage with our own communities and our own helping work.
So the way we're hoping to organize our time together is we'll be going through some content, but folks, you're welcome to add anything to the chat. So if you have some questions, we'll hopefully catch them as we come along, but we'll for sure save some time at the end of our half an hour to answer questions. So if we don't get to it during the content, hopefully we'll touch on it at the end.
And so Giwiidabindimin, let's start with that quick conversation. Giwiidosendamin comes from the Ojibwe language, and it means we walk together. And in this program, this is a week-long certificate program, and we would like to give you a taste of what some of the learning experience is like through our webinar this afternoon.
We acknowledge that our office stands on the ancestral lands on Treaty 1 territory. This is the lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Sinew, Dakota, and Dene people, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. The traditional lifeways of this land and teachings is part of a relationship that has been nourished, healed, protected, and embraced life up to and including our present day.
And as stewards to this land, I want to acknowledge the legacy from my ancestors before me and thank our elders for sharing their wisdom and to our next generations. I also want to promote this balance as we pursue our goals of reconciliation and understanding, and that we find inspiration and spirit to open our minds and our hearts to heal from the past and also celebrate change towards our future together. And so what are we going to expect to learn today? The first thing we want to talk about is a two-eyed seeing approach. I want to weave this in between much of our conversations today, as we're going to be talking about what is two-eyed seeing, as well as how do we take that into our work and how do we work in a good way with that together. And then moving into starting a relationship. And so when we were talking about this program, the question is, where do we start? And the answer that kept coming was we start in relationship. And a big part of that is starting in relationship to connection to ourselves so we can connect to others. We'll talk about that.
A lot of the hard work we do is going in before we can go out, and this program gives lots of opportunity for that.
Yeah, and so part of that in walking in a good way is storytelling. And how do we incorporate the role of storytelling in that space of our helping roles? And then into shifting the language of addiction. What are we seeing? What are we hearing in the community? And also, what are we hearing shifts in? And how do we continue to promote those shifts to walk in a good way? And then looking at building confidence and readiness for change. And at the very end of our time together, it is going to be time for you to ask us a few questions in terms of what were you hoping to learn here today, anything we can mindfully shine a light on or expand on pertaining to your learning or interests that you're hoping to hear from us today.
Yeah.
All right, so I'd like to start with just acknowledging that there are many diverse teachings that come from many lodges on Turtle Island. And when you take the full 5-day program with us, your trainers will share their own teachings and you're invited to share yours. We want to be mindful that we are not taking a pan-Indigenous approach to our learning in this program, but rather than a collective way and curiosity and wisdom in our learning spaces. And so acknowledging teachings and practices are diverse. And when in doubt, or if you have any questions about your teachings or perhaps what you heard in your community, please consult an elder in your community or somebody with that wisdom to share that from your own story and your own teachings. And then that stories and learnings in this workshop have been respectfully received from sitting with elders who have given permission for this knowledge to be shared.
And one thing I really appreciate about the program is that just like we're asking our participants to go inward first, as facilitators of the program, we do the same.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I shared a little bit about the two-eyed seeing approach. And so we'll start with, what is it? What are we talking about when we're talking about two-eyed seeing in this? And so this is from Albert Marshall, who is from Nova Scotia. And two-eyed seeing invites us to see the world through multiple lenses and honoring the strengths of diverse perspectives. So two-eyed seeing is asking us to honor the past while remaining open to possibilities of the future. And in a world that often encourages competition between different ways of knowing, this two-eyed seeing reminds us of the powerful collaboration, respect, and the balance. And so this philosophy, is asking us to recognize that there is no single perspective that holds all the answers. But by bringing together the richness of Indigenous knowledge, as well as grounded in deep connection with the land and community, and then bringing in the analytical rigor of Western science. And this way we can start to co-create solutions that are holistic, sustainable, and just. And so throughout our conversations today, we're going to be weaving these two perspectives together in our topics we'll be sharing, and hopefully really displaying in a way of two-eyed approach and how we can collaborate and work together.
Applying multiple lenses allows us to value all knowledge. Not one way of knowing is better than another. And the 5-day certificate program really encompasses that spirit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we're talking about, where do we start? And so we start with relationship. We start with cultivating conversations. And so we know that there are many ways of knowing, but many cultures have something in common across Turtle Island, and it is that they seek a relationship to land, a relationship to place, for seeking knowledge and renewal in these spaces. Now, land is not just a resource, but a living entity. It's living and in this space of who we are in relationship with this land. It's a reciprocal relationship. The land provides sustenance, identity, belonging, wisdom, and teaching. And so being really aware that this is not just a piece that we take from, but rather than a space that we are in relationship with, and that there's a reciprocal relationship that's happening with that. And so in that space of living in harmony with nature's cycles, such as the seasons, lunar phases, shapes, lifestyles, and practices, this connection fosters a deep sense of respect and stewardship for the land and for the environment itself. And so from our land, our place, we seek knowledge about ourselves, our world, skill building, healing for ourselves, our culture, our communities. Everything is in living, breathing connection, which means we are in living, breathing connection.
I appreciate the perspective of bringing in the rhythm of nature and the land that we walk on. I would argue that much of the world that we live in tells us that rhythm should exist in a daily cycle. Every day should follow the next day in a cycle that sometimes almost doesn't suit us. Whereas this perspective of honoring nature's cycles maybe allows for more of that natural wisdom to have some place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so place, we are all from a place. And in this Giwidabindimin program, we want to encourage collective sharing from all people, sharing their teachings from all places. And so this is a spirit of two-eyed seeing. I often go to, I can share what I carry in my teachings and what I have learned in the way that I have walked, but I won't share the teachings that I don't know or have yet to learn. And I want to encourage a collective learning environment for folks who have other teachings and not just Indigenous perspective teachings, right? My mind goes to, there is a vast cultural array in our world, and there are cultures and teachings that come from so many of those places. The first thought of my mind is going to like the Celtic culture, right? Drawn to that beautiful scenery, and then having the teachings and the stories that go with Celtic traditions. is from people in a place, in a land of knowing that they, again, have received teaching and healing and learning from. And I would love to learn new perspectives and new teachings from those old ways. And how do I incorporate that in the way that I walk now? And also, how do I incorporate that in that space of Indigenous lens of teachings that I already know and have received? And so this program is a beautiful way to have this encompassing opportunity that is a rare opportunity to sit with people and hear each other and listen to teachings, and then to reflect on how does that impact and how does that enhance our helping work. Mm-hmm. So at this moment, I would like to invite folks to take out your phones and take a picture of this slide. I want this to be a little bit of a tool and a reflection for folks who are here with us and sharing today, in a space of starting to ask the question, how are we in connection with our place? And so how are you in connection with your place? The reflection questions we have here is, what land did your feet grow up on? What teachings have you been given from this place? And what values or beliefs has this place given to you? Renee Linklater inspired me in her book, Decolonizing Trauma Work. She describes, first, we write our own stories and share our position in the world. Then we write about the world. And this poses to be a huge task because we have to come to terms with who we are and how we have come to do the work that we do. And it is in this work, this heart work that we do. This work challenges you to unite with your own spirit, to connect the disconnected. Now, if we not only seek to connect to land of Mother Earth, but also seek places somewhere within ourselves, in this way, some people have perhaps lost their identity in themselves and lost their identity to the land and culture. And this means that they have perhaps lost identity to their place. And with this idea in mind, we are seeking to find knowledge within ourselves and within our communities, much like we seek land for that healing and that wisdom. So in this program, we want to explore our own places. Who are you? What place do you connect to? How do you walk with your relatives as they come home to find their place? And so in this Giwidabindimin program, this is where we begin the conversation of starting relationship, to connecting with self so that we can connect with people. We begin with connecting to the disconnected so we can walk with others. And it's in a two-eyed seeing way of how we want to be being in our work.
It was in facilitating this program, it was a participant that reminded me that perhaps we can only take our community members, our family members, our clients along their healing journey as far as we have walked. And I really think that this program gives us the opportunity to reflect on the path that we've taken so far.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like each part of that is a tool that we bring into our helping work. I think sometimes we forget that as we're doing our own work or asking uncomfortable questions and challenging ourselves. I think it's equally as important to shine that light on. These are tools that we are learning, so we can also use these tools with others to walk with them as well.
Being willing to do that self-exploration.
Mm-hmm. All right, so moving into storytelling and helping relationships. Now, by observing the honored way of knowing and sharing by listening and responding, storytelling and narrative expression are vital tools for teaching, preserving history, fostering community bonds. And these traditions are holding profound significance in therapeutic contexts. They offer unique ways to understand and heal emotional and those psychological wounds that we see, that we work with. So by incorporating storytelling into those therapeutic relationships, it's not only culturally aware, but also enhances that healing process. It starts allowing for a deeper connection with people, fostering emotional expression, and aligns with those therapeutic processes that also walk beside some of those Indigenous worldviews and ways of sharing. So, in this approach, it can be a powerful means of reclaiming stories, identity, and a voice, especially within a healing space.
A Western approach to this, as folks I'm sure some of you are aware, would be considered narrative therapy. So in this way, we marry these two perspectives. And we know that narrative therapy allows for all of this to come to the forefront. It's a therapeutic approach that honors a person's voice, it honors their perspective, it encourages them to become an active participant in their own healing and their own journey. So we blend tools from both perspectives and bring this forward for folks to explore.
All right, that space of addiction. So first we wanted to start with talking about what is addiction. And something that really resonates for me is this definition of addiction, which is an unhealthy relationship between a person and a mood-altering substance, experience, event, or activity, which contributes to negative life consequences and their reoccurrence despite that person's desire to change.
You might notice a picture of the coyote on the slide there. And I understand that the coyote is often told in story as a trickster. And I like this juxtaposition because it reminds us that addiction is absolutely a trickster. So addiction tells us that, sometimes it tells us that we're in control. Addiction whispers in our ear that we're alone, when in fact we know that to heal from addiction, we must seek connection. So thinking about addiction as a trickster reminds us that there's lessons to be learned and that healing must happen through connection. And that healing process happens when we start to see the trick, when we start to recognize that trick.
Alrighty, so talking about addiction and language. I like this little piece here. I like talking about this, especially when I was working with youth. And I think for many times, for decades, we've been trying to convince people that, drugs are dangerous. They're definitely not fun and they're totally deadly. And yet this really starts coming from that space of the war on drugs. It starts coming to an us versus them perspective, the good versus bad perspective, if you will. Anybody remember that fried egg commercial? Scramble it up. This is your brain on drugs. That's definitely having an impact still today. All those scare them straight messages are still lingering very closely to a lot of perhaps conversations that are being had with our youth and or with folks who are in addiction, struggling and living in that space. And so beginning in the 1980s, those public service announcements weaponized something that they knew people already loved, and that was TV. The simple idea was to use TV advertising to cement messages in people's minds that would discourage drug use and encourage them to stay substance-free. Now, the impact of these campaigns has caused the language of addiction to often be rooted in assumptions of judgment and in assumptions of isolation. The more isolated you are, the more problems grow. We want to shift language from judgment to curiosity and connection instead.
We understand that language creates reality. So it's about us as helpers in our community, recognizing the language we use, thinking about maybe some of the biases that exist because of our, socialization and conditioning related to some of these messages that JC mentioned. So just being conscientious about the language that we're using. Mm-hmm. So in that spirit, just thinking about shifting some of the language. We're not here to say that any language is bad or wrong. Some of the language in that first column maybe you use and it suits you and it suits your helping work, and that's totally fine. But we're just here to suggest maybe taking a different lens to it, and just recognizing that sometimes the language we use is embedded with judgment. And I'm sure we can all relate when we're feeling judged. It really gets in the way of our ability to heal. So recognizing maybe language like addict, alcoholic, drug addict, perhaps can have a judgmental tone. So maybe shifting our language to something like the person experiencing addiction. Or perhaps thinking about hitting rock bottom. That is a common jargon that we use in the addictions world a fair bit. And again, that could suit somebody just fine and that can capture their experience, but just recognizing for some folks it might be laden with judgment. So shifting it to perhaps language of experiencing a turning point. So this is all related to our shifting of perspective. So instead of asking ourselves, why is this person experiencing addiction? Why are they dependent on a substance or a behavior? What's wrong with them? It's shifting to more of a perspective of why are they experiencing this pain, and why have they shifted to using a substance or engaging in a behavior that's not helpful to cope with that pain. So exploring what is the source of the pain.
And so weaving together the conversation and wanting to begin a conversation of life promotion, I want to begin with sharing a sweetgrass teaching from Elder Louise Lavallee from Winnipeg here on Treaty 1. And she shares, sweetgrass is a sacred medicine that represents kindness. Each braid is comprised of 7 strands of grass. Each strand represents a human being, while the braid's 3 sections, this embodies the trinity of the mind, body, and the spirit. Much like a strand of hair, every sweetgrass strand poses beauty. It's a delightful aroma and individuality. However, like hair, each strand is more fragile on its own, yet when woven together, those same strands gain strength and gains unity. And when I think about this topic, to me, this teaching reminds me that sometimes when I'm alone, I too become vulnerable. I can become lonely. I can become angry. Perhaps I might feel despair. However, I also recognize that when I'm surrounded by support and love and strength of my community, my family, of those around me, I can become strong again. And so it's in this spirit of kindness and love that we want to approach this conversation with life promotion.
So the perspective of the sweetgrass teaching as well as the life promotion framework really is the foundation of the entire 5-day certificate program. So a life promotion perspective or framework, we give credit to elders, community, Indigenous researchers that have shifted the perspective from suicide prevention or intervention to life promotion, which is a strength-based approach that tells us that we all have what we need inside of us to heal. And it focuses more on a holistic approach. Instead of focusing on the problems, we're going, what's going right? And recognizing that health is not just recovery from addiction or recognizing my thoughts of suicide. It's more about looking at where can I enhance my life in every way. So maybe that means connecting with ceremony, exploring hobbies, connecting to music, being on the land, all of those things being a really important source of healing, not just focusing on what's going wrong.
Right. And as you're talking, I'm recognizing there's another 2-eyed seeing approach, right? That way of taking all of the knowledge we've gained and learned and equally honoring each piece, going, maybe this will help me on my journey. Maybe this will help me on my journey. Let's try something different. How about this? And I really love that approach of holistic perspective because we can really start integrating new ideas, new tools, and perhaps something that might work. Yeah.
It's allowing for more space for exploration. And with a life promotion lens, it does away with some of the stigma. Instead of just looking at, for people to internalize, like, why am I bad? Why am I struggling? Let's look at what's going well.
And so in many communities, grief is not merely an individual experience, but it's a communal journey. And when we lose someone to suicide, the sorrow that envelops is profound and unique, and really touching every aspect of being and that collective spirit of being togetherness. Grief in many cultures is seen as a journey. It's a path that we must walk with care, guided by the wisdom of ancestors and the strength of community. It's a journey of the heart and of the spirit, one that demands our full presence and respect. In the Giwidabindimin program, we dedicated an entire day to talking about weaving together both the Western and Indigenous perspectives of this suicide and life promotion, its impact, as well as teachings and tools for these spaces. So if you come with us into the program, we spend a whole day looking at and learning that holistic view on how to see perhaps new tools, and that space of just collective being together and what we're seeing in community, what we're seeing in our work, also what's working in our work. Oftentimes, I find we start talking about what's not working and we miss what is. What do we need to highlight? Where do we want to navigate? Where do we grow with that space?
And what I really appreciate about the 5 days is that it creates that opportunity for reflection for the helper. Often in community and the work that we're doing, it's rushing from one thing to the next, crisis after crisis. But this really allows and creates space to go, okay, what am I doing that's working and what am I doing that's not working so well? Because when we start moving quickly, sometimes we become almost, I want to say robots in our work, but not quite. The feeling of there's no space for reflection. This program allows for that space for reflection, so then we can build that foundation to then grow from.
All right, and into the pathways towards growth. Speaking of, the first conversation I want to have with folks today was going to be about empathy and how empathy plays a crucial role in facilitating change by fostering understanding, building trust, and creating a supportive environment. So when people feel understood and valued, they're more open to new perspectives and willing to interpret those spaces to engage in the process of change. And so empathy helps to address that resistance and reduce defensiveness at the same time. It also encourages collaboration, making it easier to navigate some of those challenges and really achieve that meaningful and perhaps long-lasting transition as we incorporate that holistic approach to our work, as well as introduce the holistic approach to healing.
So whether you're a counselor, a coach, or somebody to look to make change in your own life, there's really a few strategies we want to highlight to encourage change talk. So some folks here might be familiar with some of the tools that motivational interviewing gives us. So in the program, we take some time to flesh out some of that and to practice these skills. So for example, asking open-ended questions, helping folks really dig a bit deeper. We take the time to reflect and affirm, so reflecting back what the person has said, emphasizing the change talk that they're sharing. Additionally, we want to explore that ambivalence. So look for opportunities to shake that out. So helping the person explore both sides of their ambivalence, looking for the pros, looking for the cons, and this can help them clarify their own motivations, clarify their own reasons for change, clarify their own values, and explore some of that incongruence. We're also going to take the time to explore the skill of highlighting past successes. So encouraging the individual to talk about times when they've made successes in the past. Obviously, this can help boost their confidence, see that they've got the skills to make the changes that they need, and to really support their autonomy. So to remind individuals that their ability to change is within their power. So highlighting all the choices they have to make and empowering them to take ownership of that change process. Additionally, we want to explore resistance. So resistance can be a sign that a person or a helper are out of step with each other or out of sync. I've always said that I don't mind resistance. If I'm getting resistance, it gives me lots to work with. So resistance really is behaviors that reflect movement away from the desired change. And it can look like all these things listed on the screen. So things like arguing, interrupting, negating, and ignoring. And we give space in the 5-day certificate program to look at how do some of these behaviors rub up against our attitudes as a helper. Because I know for me, sometimes when I get some of this, my first reaction is to maybe feel defensive or to start judging the person internally. Oh, they're not motivated. They really don't want to make change. I shouldn't be working harder than them. But thinking about, how does some of that internal judgment get in the way of that change process for them? So recognizing that resistance is part of what we can expect along the journey.
And then looking at some of our strategies for responding to that resistance. A helpful starting place for responding is to acknowledge that the person is in disagreement, right? Their feelings or their perceptions, that reflective listening statements can really serve some of those purpose. Other ways to include would be to look at reframing, offering another perspective to that person's statement. So for example, it sounds like your sister cares about you and is concerned, but she expresses it in a way that makes you angry. Another example could include shifting focus, offering responses that shift away from the person's obstacles to the areas that might be more productive or more helpful. An example of that could be, so you drink red wine to be healthy. What else do you do to be healthy? Right? to have that space of encouragement. We're not going to have that us versus them, but rather than come beside us and have a conversation about it. Another one we have up here is the agreeing with a twist. And this is agreeing with what that person is saying, and we're providing a reflection followed by a reframe. An example of this might look like, you're right. It seems like there's a lot of health benefits to drinking red wine, along with maybe some risks. Encouraging the personal control and choice, assuring a client that only they can choose to change their own behavior and their own patterns. So an example would be, it's completely up to you. You're the one in the charge here. You're the one in the change who gets to decide where, how much, and when, if that suits you in a way that you want to navigate and live life, right? And then the last two I have up here is try to offer two reflections for each question you ask. So not wanting to consistently ask questions all the time, but rather than, using that wide array of communication skills and having two reflections for each question. Or at least trying to make at least half the questions you ask open-ended questions. Not giving that space for the yes or no's, but rather than really wanting to have curiosity and give them opportunity to be more curious about it. And oftentimes, for me, I don't see those broader perspectives on the periphery if I'm only answering yes or no questions. I find it really helpful when folks are asking me, tell me more about this and how are we going to navigate that? Or what do you see more of? What do you wish? Right? The miracle question of if you woke up tomorrow, how would you know? I think those things are all really important to have in this strategy for change talk.
And the Giwiidabindimin program gives us lots of room to practice these skills, to explore how it's been helpful or perhaps not helpful in your own practice, and to open up the floor to some of these discussions.
Mm-hmm. All right, so speaking of opening up the floor for discussions, we have some thoughts in the chat. Any questions? Throw it in the chat, folks. Wherever you are listening from, let us know. I wanted to ensure that folks are receiving some answers to the curiosities that perhaps they came for today. Give folks a few minutes to pop that in.
If anybody's interested in letting us know where you're viewing from, that would scratch my curious itch. All right, we have a question from Alex. How do you stay grounded when supporting someone carrying deep pain? Oh, that's an excellent question. I think a lot of us do that in many different ways. We can get really creative in how we do that. I'd say the first thing that pops into my mind is ensuring that my own cup is full. So taking that time for my wellness outside of my work to ensure I have the patience to manage what's in front of me. When my cup is full, it's easier for me to have a regulated nervous system and to be able to do that heart work. I've seen people do really creative things like having a particular pair of shoes that they wear when they get into work and lacing them up real tight as a reminder of staying grounded, using mantras to keep us focused. Do you have any suggestions?
My mind reflects to, I remember when I was in a place when it felt like I had to get up and be a warrior every day to do the work that I was doing and that helping work and that heart work. And for me, it was reminding myself I'm allowed to fill my cup. Sometimes it wasn't about what am I doing to fill my cup, but actually giving myself the space and the opportunity to open up and go, wait a second, I need that day off and I'm allowed to take that day off. Right? And what I do in that time, if I end up sleeping, if I end up going for a walk, if I just end up watching Netflix on the couch all day, I'm allowed to take that time to just slow it down. And the more that I can come back to that space of being here and present for myself, the more I am able to walk into a space with others and be present with them.
Yes, absolutely. And because the helping work that we're doing we only have so much, I'll call it emotional bandwidth. We might be using that same sort of energy with our loved ones when we go home as we're doing all day. Or maybe it's continuous. Maybe it's 24 hours that I'm giving to community and helping in that way. And because we're using maybe a similar skill set in all different parts of our life, it's even more important for us to give ourselves that permission for wellness. Wellness is an ethical mandate.
Jordan has in the chat here, what if someone doesn't have any specific ties to a place? Is it a location pivotal for identity health? I love this question. Thank you for asking that. I can really relate to this space where my feet did not grow up on Dog Creek. I know that is where my family is from. That is where the colonial trauma has happened. And because of all of those impacts in my own family line and my place, my feet grew up on somewhere that was not on Lake Manitoba First Nation. And so for me, it's been an active space of recovering that identity and recovering some of that culture that was lost because of those harms. Now, when I talk about what place am I from, my mind goes to, I'll use the phrasing in our workshops about what land did my feet grow up on? Because the land my feet grew up on was very, very different than the land that my family is from. I grew up in land that is full of sand, land that had a lot of rivers, land, particularly I think about juniper berries and crocuses. And there's a lot of learning that I did in connecting to land that started really filling my cup when I was actually at my first job out on the land. And it was sort of by accident I started reconnecting to that. And so it got me thinking now about the work that I'm doing, and the land that my feet grew up on was literally the land that you were walking on. If we don't have that space of connection to land, that connection to place, right? And this is where I go, maybe some people have lost that place, that connection to land. However, where did your feet walk on, right? Sometimes there's going to be a space, that sacred place, maybe that quiet sitting spot. If you're an angry teenager and you're like, oh, I'm done, and you go for that walk and you leave your house, perhaps you were thinking you were never returning again, and you find that quiet spot by that tree, or that quiet spot on the far side of that field, or that quiet spot on the hill. That was a moment you connected to land. What did you learn from that moment, that place that you kept going back to for that connection? And that's where we can start. I think that space of connecting of here and now and learning in that place gives us a really great opportunity to reflect on what did I learn in that space for values. Even if you were just by yourself, sitting on that hill, sitting by that tree, overlooking the river, the lake, there were things that were happening within you. And that's the moment I want to capture and talk about, because those are the moments that we are having that internal learning and that internal growth, those internal conversations with ourselves. And there was moments in there that taught you values of yourself and lessons for yourself. And that's sort of where that very space of uniqueness comes from. Right. So great question, Jordan. I love that. Thank you.
All right, looking at the next question from Donna. Have you explored the work of Gabor Mate, starting with what's right with the addiction to identify the pain first in the person? Oh yes, Gabor Mate is definitely a guru that I've consumed in embarrassing amounts of work that he's done. But yes, what's right with the addiction? And that's a question I love to explore with people, because it gives people to recognize what the addiction, what the substance, what the behavior is serving them. Why is it serving them? Why are they engaging in that substance and that behavior? So if I ask that simple question, tell me about all the things that are working for you. Tell me about all the things you love about that particular substance. It gives people to explore what needs are being met through that substance or through that activity. And if we can discover some of the needs that are being met, then we can go, hey, how else can we meet those needs? And obviously healthier ways.
That also reflects for me that space of using a positive psychology framework in addictions. There's a great blog on the CTR website written about positive psychology versus toxic positivity. Try that again. Positive psychology framework versus toxic positivity working with addictions. You can find that on our blogs on our website. And for me, that goes to what is what is working? What are we actually doing that is helping right now? How are we not farther along in a space? Or how have we used our resilience and our skills now to continue on the path that we're on, but in a good way, or trying to find healing in a good way? Especially when we're navigating spaces of addictions, it is not good versus bad, right? We know that it's about connection seeking. The definition that we shared was about, that space of having these experiences, regardless of that person's insistence and desire to change. And so in that moment, I think about that piece and go, what is that desire to change? Right? And they could be sitting in front of me telling life stories, and yet there's a desire to change. What is that? So I use a positive psychology framework to start exploring some of that and start really looking into that curiosity of perspective shifting. Mm-hmm.
Do you want to read the next question?
Sure. This is this program appropriate for educators, managers, or program developers in mental health and addictions work, or most appropriate for frontline service providers? I would say both. The way the program has been designed has been looking at how we walk so we can walk with others. And so if we're looking at it from a leadership standpoint, especially if we're looking at trauma-informed care, trauma-informed leadership spaces, I will often talk about, when you had your first job, what was your supervisor like? I can say my first job, they were pretty strict on boundaries and expectations, and I learned how to fall in place inside of a box. And then now looking at, leadership and spaces, having very different conversations around that. And so when we start looking at ourselves first in relationship with ourselves, and then how do we take that relationship in with others, I think that can really translate across many different places and spaces. I think very recently we even had somebody who was very much involved in land and conservation land in his community, and he came to take the program with us, and feedback we got was he had really enjoyed it. And part of that was going back to just learning and discovering, and that self-reflection, and how do I walk with myself on that, and then as well as how do I walk with those I work with. If we're looking at high crisis situations, it doesn't always have to be in the mental health field for this program to really hit home, but rather than people who want to walk in a good way, walk with others, people who are leaders in their community, in mental health spaces or not. I think it gives a lot of perspective and a lot of curiosity, and I hope a lot of learning to a lot of different areas, and not just mental health.
And it's a program that's been constructed with a decolonizing lens. So just the way in which the program is laid out along in the 5 days, that in and of itself is a learning tool. So giving us the opportunity to shift our perspective into one of, hey, maybe we can do things in a different way and not the way we've always done them. Additionally, we can tailor the program. So if we had a group of leaders, we could kind of pivot in that direction or lean in that direction more versus maybe some frontline service providers. But we've certainly provided this training and facilitated it with groups that included frontline service providers, leadership, and folks with lived experience who are natural helpers in their community, and people who are on their own healing journey, who are looking for tools just for themselves personally, and not necessarily as a helper per se.
Yeah, we've had a lot of diverse folks sitting in these trainings with us, not just the frontline mental health workers. Right off my head, I'm thinking about police force, I'm thinking about firefighters have sat with us. There's a very diverse group and range that people come to sit in these programs with us. I would say if you're curious, give us a shout out. I know Kat behind the scenes here is making sure all the questions are being jotted down and doing all our tech support in the back. But also somebody who is able to link you to our programs, what we're doing, to get more information for you for these programs. If you have thoughts, questions, curiosities, something we talk about here at CTRI is if you can get to your community, we can get to your community. We travel all over the place. And we have trainers who are all across Turtle Island, not just Canada. And so we have this space and this flexibility to really offer such a diverse program to so many different communities and places and spaces for people. So if you have thoughts or if you're curious about more, please give us a shout out, reach out. We've got a great team of folks here behind the scenes who are amazing at support and can answer a ton of questions, as well as work with you to start tailoring this program to what your needs would be. what do you see in your communities? What are you seeing in your helping work? And then being able to talk about those topics and tailoring the program specifically to what your needs are in that same space of using this framework, talking about decolonizing, using the two-eyed seeing perspectives. Most of what we've talked about here today is really looking at decolonizing what learning could be and what it is and how we have these conversations. And I think that's really important to note, especially when we're looking at how do we provide care for people in community. And I think it's a unique opportunity for platforms like this where we can share some of this knowledge and hopefully reach more people. So, yeah.
A heartfelt thank you to everybody who logged in today. We're so glad that you joined us. We hope that this is just the beginning of our relationship with you, and hopefully we connect again soon.
All right. Thanks for joining us. Take care.
Take good care.